The Woman in White, my night at Columbia's Fallon House. I never believed in ghosts. Not until I spent a night in Columbia, California's Fallon House Theatre. My name is George, and what I'm about to tell you happened some years ago. I went to Columbia to research ghost stories to separate fact from fiction, history from folklore. I thought I'd walk through some old buildings, take some photos, maybe feel a chill or two that I could chalk up to drafty windows. I was wrong. Columbia isn't like other ghost towns. When gold was discovered in 1850, 15,000 people flooded into this place. They called it the gem of the southern mines. But gems are born under pressure, in darkness, deep in the earth. And Columbia's darkness runs deeper than any mine shaft. The Fallon House Theatre sits at the heart of what's left of that town. Built in 1885, it's one of the oldest theaters in California. On stage, actors performed for miners flush with gold dust. Upstairs, the hotel rooms hosted travelers, gamblers, and women whose names history forgot. And one of those women never left. I arrived in Columbia just before sunset. The town is a state historic park now, preserved exactly as it looked in the 1850s. Wooden sidewalks, hitching posts, buildings that sag with age and secrets. Most tourists leave before dark. By the time I parked my car, the streets were empty. The only sound was wind moving through the pines and the distant creak of the old Wells Fargo sign swinging on its chains. The Fallon House stands 3 stories tall, red brick faded to the color of dried blood. The theater entrance faces Main Street, but I'd arranged to enter through the hotel above. A park ranger named Sarah met me at the side door. "You're the one doing those stories?" she asked, her voice flat. I nodded, trying to seem professional. "I want to document the history and the legends. Spend some time in the building after hours." Sarah's expression didn't change. "The theater's been locked for the night. You'll have access to the second-floor hallway in room 7. That's where most people experience things." "What kind of things?" I asked. She handed me a large brass key, old and heavy in my palm. "You'll see. Or you won't. Either way, you need to be out by sunrise. Lock the door behind you when you leave." Then she was gone, walking quickly back toward the park headquarters, and I was alone with the Fallon House. The door opened with a sound like a sigh. Inside, the air was different, thick and still, like being underwater. I stood in a narrow hallway, wallpaper peeling in long strips, exposing plaster underneath. Gas lamps lined the walls, converted to electricity but kept in their original fixtures. The light they gave was weak and yellowish. 7 doors lined the hallway. Room 7 was at the far end. I started documenting immediately, taking photos, recording video on my phone. The hallway was maybe 30 feet long, but it felt longer. Each step echoed on the wooden floorboards, and I could hear them creaking even after I stopped moving. At room 3, I paused. The door was slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it. Sarah said the rooms were locked. Through the gap, I could see an iron bed frame, a wash basin, a mirror reflecting the hallway behind me. And for just a second, just a fraction of a second, I thought I saw someone standing in that reflection. Someone in white. I spun around. The hallway was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, there was nothing there. Just my own face, pale and uncertain. I kept walking. Room 7's door was closed. The brass number plate had turned green with age, but the 7 was still clear. I fitted the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click, and the door swung inward. The room was small. A narrow bed with a faded quilt. A wooden chair beneath a window that looked out onto Main Street. A pitcher and basin on a dresser that had probably been there since 1885. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust except the bed. The quilt looked almost clean, as if someone had been lying there recently. I set up my equipment. Camera on a tripod. Audio recorder on the dresser. Notebook and pen. I'd planned to spend the night documenting the room, maybe doing some EVP sessions, that kind of thing. It was 9:47 p.m. when I heard the first footsteps. They came from the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps. A woman's boots on wooden floorboards. I went to the door and opened it. The hallway was empty. But the footsteps continued, moving toward me from the direction of the staircase. I could hear them clearly, heel, toe, but there was nothing there. They stopped directly in front of room 7. The air turned cold. Not cool, cold. My breath came out in vapor clouds. And I swear to you, I could smell something. Perfume. Old perfume, like the kind they kept in those cut glass bottles in the 1800s. Rose water and something sweeter, almost sickly. Hello? My voice cracked. Is someone there? The footsteps moved past me, into the room. I followed them with my eyes, tracking the sound. They crossed to the window. Stopped. Then moved to the bed, and I heard the springs creak as if someone had sat down. The impression appeared in the quilt. A clear indentation, like a person sitting on the edge of the mattress. I grabbed my camera and started filming. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. This is real, I whispered into the microphone. I'm documenting this. There's an impression on the bed and no one is. The door slammed shut behind me. The lock clicked. I was trapped in room 7 with whatever was sitting on that bed. For maybe 10 seconds, nothing happened. Just me and the indentation on the bed and the smell of roses getting stronger, almost choking. Then she appeared. Not all at once. It was like watching someone develop from a photograph, first just an outline, then details filling in. A woman in a white dress, Victorian era, high collar, long sleeves. Her hair was dark and pulled back severely from her face. She was young, maybe 25, and she would have been beautiful except for her eyes. Her eyes were empty. Not closed, empty. Like looking into wells that went down forever into nothing. She stared directly at me. Who are you? I managed to ask. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. She lifted one hand, slowly, deliberately, and pointed at the window. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to keep watching her, to not take my eyes off her for even a second. But her finger kept pointing, insistent. I turned to the window. In the reflection of the dark glass, I could see the room behind me. The bed. The dresser. And dozens of people. Men in miners' clothes. Women in silk dresses. A crowd packed into that small room, all of them watching me with those same empty eyes. I spun around. The room was empty except for the woman in white. But when I looked back at the window, the crowd was still there in the reflection. The woman stood up. She moved toward me, not walking but gliding, her feet not quite touching the floor. As she got closer, I could see more details. A bruise on her throat, dark purple against her pale skin. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. She reached out to touch my face. Her fingers were ice. Not cold, ice. Where they touched my cheek, I felt burning cold that went straight to the bone. And suddenly I knew things. Not thoughts or words, but knowledge pouring directly into my mind. Her name was Catherine. She worked at the Fallon House in 1889. She was 19 years old. A man she trusted brought her to room 7. He promised her gold, promised her a better life. Instead, he strangled her and took the small amount of money she'd saved. They found her body 3 days later. The man was never caught. She's been in room 7 ever since. Waiting. Always waiting. I stumbled backward, and her hand fell away. The knowledge stopped flooding in, but the horror of it remained. This woman, this girl, had died terrified and alone in this room, and her spirit had been trapped here for over 130 years. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry that happened to you. For the first time, her expression changed. The emptiness in her eyes flickered, and for just a moment, I saw something human there. Sadness. Loneliness. an ache so deep it made my chest hurt. Then she vanished. The temperature returned to normal. The smell of roses faded. The lock clicked open, and the door swung slowly inward. I grabbed my equipment and ran. I didn't stop to pack it properly, just snatched up what I could carry and bolted down that hallway. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and behind me, I heard other footsteps. Dozens of them. An army of the dead following me down the corridor. I hit the exit door so hard it crashed against the outside wall. Cold night air hit my face, and I gasped it in like a drowning man finding the surface. When I looked back, the doorway was dark and empty. But in the windows above, I saw faces. So many faces. All watching me leave. I drove away from Columbia doing 70 on those winding mountain roads, and I didn't slow down until I hit the highway. That was 3 weeks ago. I've reviewed the footage 100 times. You can see the impression on the bed. You can hear the footsteps. There's a moment, just 5 frames, where you can see her reflection in the window glass. I've researched Catherine since then. There was a murder in the Fallon House in 1889. The victim was never publicly named, but the death records list A.C. Morrison, age 19, cause of death, asphyxiation. She's buried in the Columbia Cemetery in an unmarked grave. I went back yesterday, in daylight this time. I put flowers on that grave. I don't know if it helps. I don't know if she's still in room 7, still waiting for justice that will never come. What I do know is this: Columbia isn't a ghost town because people left. It's a ghost town because the people who died there never did. The Fallon House still stands on Main Street. Room 7 is still there. And Catherine is still waiting. I'll be returning to Columbia for more stories. There are dozens of buildings, hundreds of deaths, countless spirits that never moved on. But I'll never forget the woman in white and the cold touch of her fingers on my face. If you visit Columbia, if you stand on Main Street after the tourists leave, listen carefully. You might hear footsteps on the wooden sidewalks. You might smell roses where no roses grow. And if you're unlucky enough to spend a night in the Fallon House, in room 7, well, I hope she's gentler with you than she needed to be. This is just the beginning. The Old West doesn't give up its dead easily, and their stories deserve to be told. Subscribe if you want to hear more. The next ghost is already waiting.